welcome back to the Shoogly Shed. This episode, I guess, is just a little bit of an update as to where I'm at and what I'm doing. As you know from the last episode, I have just made the decision to build the rest of the GS500 that the engines I've been refurbing are from. I'm in the middle of still rebuilding the engines, but I've been waiting on parts arriving. I've had to order seals and spacers and that kind of thing from afar, and some of it from abroad, so I'm waiting on things arriving before I can reassemble everything. So just now I've got the crankcase more or less ready to go. It's been repainted and stuff, ready to get all the tolerances and the bearings and the shells measured up before the crankshaft and the balancers and the gearbox all goes back into it. So that's kind of next on the list for when things arrive. We've got a new bearing to put onto the drive shaft. Funny story about the drive shaft, it was a total pain in the ass to get the bearing off of this. I bought a bearing puller and it still wasn't enough to go for it, so I ended up having to get crafty and cut the bearing and the spacer off. Luckily I was replacing the bearing anyway, but I'm now having to replace the spacer too. The spacer is now fit for the bin. So when that arrives, I can get the engine back together and then start thinking about other parts on the bike that need attention. So while I'm waiting for the parts that I need to rebuild the engine, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a rundown of what I have to build the rest of the bike out of and what my plans are. Essentially, last weekend I went and picked up the frame, a frame and a half actually. I'll explain a bit more about that later. Some forks, I got the wiring loom, I got some seats, some plastics and stuff. I'm not sure if I'm still going to use the original seat and plastics, but it's good to have them. There's a whole bunch of other parts. I still need to collect the wheels, the handlebars, a few other bits and pieces before I can really take stock and decide what I'm going to build out of it all. But I'm pretty sure I know roughly what I'm going to do to the frame, so I was hoping I could maybe talk you through that and show you a little bit of the modifications I'm going to make. So as far as frames go, this is what we're working with. I've got one complete frame with swing arm, and it is more or less complete. There is a section of tubing that goes from here and round and joins on here that is removed for the engine to be removed. And I do have two of them actually, so that's fine. Aside from that, it is complete, and then I also have half. Basically got the subframe from another bike. This one, I think it got chopped for some kind of chopper cruiser project, I believe. Maybe someone made a new back piece subframe, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, either way, my plan with this bike is to strip off everything from the subframe of this that I don't want. The classic modification with the GS500 is what I've done with my other bike, is cut it here, essentially, which is where these bars join, and then chop this brace, and then you have a flat seat sitting across the top of the frame there. That's quite the classic obvious thing to do, and it's probably what I'm going to do with this one, but that's not all I want to do with it. There's a few other things I wanted to do. I want to remove a lot of the tabs. I'm going to lose the pillion pegs, but like on my other GS500, I actually made these removable, so they can bolt on and off. Just now they're welded onto the frame, so I'm hopefully going to come up with something similar to what I did on my other bike, to have removable pillion pegs, because as much as I like a single seat, it's always nice to be able to give someone a lift, isn't it? Aside from that, the front of the frame will stay pretty much as is. My level of frame building experience, or lack of there, I should say, tells me not to mess with this front portion too much. It holds way too much weight, and I wouldn't be confident with any modifications I made to that. Most of the modifications that I made to this frame will be purely for things like mounting accessories and seats and that kind of thing. Nothing structural, no structural integrity to be compromised. I just don't trust my frame knowledge and also my welding skills to do anything that really requires a huge amount of stress testing or strength. Everything I do, this will probably be cosmetic, so I'm happy enough with my skill set for doing that kind of modification. But yeah, it's a dry day today, and there's few and far between dry days in Scotland at this time of year, so no time like the present. I think I might get the grinder out and just have a quick look at cleaning off some of the tabs I won't be using, and then stripping back this other subframe and seeing what on that I use. Let's have a go, let's see. Right, so I've pretty much made all the cuts that I want to make just now. I've got a lot of grinding to do just to clean things up. Aside from that, pretty happy with that. Next thing I'm going to do is to take the swing arm off. Should have done that first, to be honest. It's doing my head in every time I pick the frame up. It just gets in my way. So I'll just try and unbolt that. I've never actually taken a swing arm off a GS500 before, so this could be a bit of a voyage of discovery. I'm hoping it's just a simple procedure. I'm going to find out, I think. So under these covers is a big bolt that runs all the way through the swing arm to here. So I imagine undo that bolt that the arm swings on, and it should just come off. Right folks, if you're squeamish, look away now. Ah! Oh my god! A massacre. Butchery. I decided to just chop the extra subframe up, just into lengths. Get all the tabs off it. Obviously, anything I use will need properly cleaned up and stuff. However, the advantage of having all this is that this is all the same steel, but it's also the same dimension for that one. So my hope is that I can use some of this metal for the modifications that I hope to make to this frame. The plan for the back of this frame is to use a length from the other subframe, bend it into a seat hoop to go onto here. Adventures in bending box tube still to come. So one thing about GS500s is there's quite a lot out there, and this is more or less the customization everyone does to their frame. They just chop that back section as I've done, and then whack a flat seat on it, and job's a good one. However, I feel like I've got this opportunity to get a bit creative and artistic. So I'm hoping with this frame to try my hand at a bit of trellising. If you don't know what trellising is, essentially it's like a garden trellis. It's basically a sort of lattice work. So I'm hoping to weld some bars in V kind of formations through here. So basically out of that scrap. It's not going to add any, well, it's not going to need to add any kind of structural strength. It probably will as a byproduct, but the frame's strong enough as it is. It just needs a couple of cross members. Aside from that, it will just be aesthetic, and I think it's quite a cool look for this kind of chunky frame, a wee bit of a trellis subframe. So that's my plan for the back of this bike. We'll see how that goes. So that is the start of the work on the frame. Next episode I will either be buttoning up the bottom half of the engine if some parts arrive in the post, otherwise it will be a little bit more work on the frame. As usual, give the video a like, leave a comment, and more importantly subscribe to the Shoogly Shed Motors channel, and I'll see you next time.